Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org. From a young age, Sarah Spier seemed destined for success. At just 18 years old, she was hired as a film specialist for the Academy Award-winning movie No Country for Old Men.
I was actually in college and high school at the same time, starting at the age of 14.
You knew if she wanted to do something, she was going to do it.
But her Hollywood career quickly took an unexpected turn toward a heroin addiction. Sarah fell in love with the drug dealer, and she said in her mind it was a modern-day Romeo and Juliet love story.
It almost fed that fantasy and story in my mind that we were destined lovers of some really horrible ending of a romantic book where everybody dies. And that's really, I ended up marrying him, and that's what I got till death do us part.
I'm Angela Kennecke. Welcome to Grieving Out Loud. Today we have a very unique conversation we hope will lead to a greater understanding of substance use disorder and how it can literally affect anyone. Join me as I sit down with Sarah and her mom to talk about their journey from Hollywood to heroin to healing. Get ready for a roller coaster of emotions as we uncover how a mother's love and determination pulled Sarah back from the brink. Well, Sarah and Cary, welcome to Grieving Out Loud. I am so grateful to meet both of you. We were connected by a mutual friend of Sarah's and mine, and it turns out that our stories are so remarkably similar, except Cary, you have your daughter, Sarah, with you today, and I'm so grateful for that. But I want to dive into this story from the beginning. Maybe, Cary, you can start and tell me a little bit about what Sarah was like growing up and the things that she cared about, what your relationship was like.
Yes, Sarah was just full of energy. She was type A, go getter. She was not a partier. She and I have been bonded from the day she was born. We were like just two little peas in a pod. As a matter of fact, when I was pregnant, I was told I was having a boy. It's a boy, boy, boy. Everything was a boy. So all I had were boy names. And the night before I went into labor, I had a dream, and this being came to me like I am speaking to you and said, "You are having a girl, and her name is Sarah." As clear as I'm speaking to you, this is what came to me. So when I woke up, I was in labor, and I hadn't really thought about it again. But then after this horrible labor, and I broke my tailbone, and I ended up with a fever, and out she came, and they're like, "It's a girl. What's her name?" And I was like, "Oh, I know her name. It's Sarah."
Wow. I had a dream when I was pregnant with Emily that I was having a girl I didn't know, and it looked just like Emily at about 4 years old. It was uncanny. It's just uncanny. And I also had a very difficult labor as well with her, 37 hours.
We're like sisters from another mister.
I guess.
So
I
weird.
guess. So now, Sarah, we'll quit talking about your birth and we'll go into she mentioned that you were type A and you were really directed what you wanted to do in life, right? I mean, you knew what you wanted.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was actually in college and high school at the same time, starting at the age of 14. I was working on an interpreting American Sign Language interpreting degree, and I was working in film actually with my beautiful mom who used to make documentaries and kind of came from the film world. So I was working on documentaries in high school and college. Anything I was going to put my mind to, I was going to do it. And I did. And by 18, I was actually working with the Coen brothers on No Country for Old Men.
That's impressive.
You knew if she wanted to do something, she was going to do it. And it was a little bit challenging as a child because because she really thought she was the boss, and she was, because that's not really my personality type. But she was so like, if she wanted something done, she was going to do it. And I got to tell you, that tenacity is a very big part of her survival because she, at some point in that recovery, decided that she would make it through this. And that part of her personality that so many parents maybe try to squash a little bit because it can be a little overwhelming as a mother having a child that it's my way and this is what I'm doing. I think it saved her.
Yeah. I get what you're saying. Emily was very much the same, strong-willed and knew what she wanted and graduated from high school with like 12 hours of college credit, that kind of thing. I mean, just
Right.
all the same. Like you just don't think that your child is going to make a choice to use substances because they seem to want so much in life, right? And you wanted so much, Sarah.
Oh, I wanted so much and I was doing so much. But
Yeah.
now that I understand really like the neurobiology of substance use disorder and addiction, it actually makes sense. I mean, on our podcast, we laughed and we said it's not a joke, but it's serious. Check on your type A children because there are different brain chemistries, dopamine, serotonin. I almost think we're hardwired in a way to want more, and that's great when it's channeled towards a productive way, but it's also really dangerous when you do enter into maybe substances that are affecting your brain chemistry. I know what it's like to have my brain hijacked. And that same tenacity that I had, and I still have towards a project or an idea that I have, it was like 1,000 times more when I was injected with heroin. I mean, that moment, I knew I dropped to the ground and I started to sob and I just kept saying, I'm so, a cuss word, but like, I'm so done. I'm so done. I'm so done. I'm never going to be okay again. It was that same drive, but times 1,000. It's the brain chemistry. We're just really far behind in this industry and don't know enough about the brain yet.
Yeah, I think our culture, we're doing an entire curriculum for young children, teach them about the brain and how to keep the brain safe and their brains and what drugs and other substances do to the brain. I mean, I just feel if you're equipped at a younger age, just having the knowledge may help. Not always, but it may help in some cases. So, Carrie, you probably didn't have any worries about Sarah, right?
Not really. I really didn't. When I started worrying was when she hooked up with this guy. I could see things going bad really quickly, and I knew he was really bad. Then I started getting worried. But had you said she's going to OD on heroin, not in a million years. I started suspecting that she was maybe taking prescription pills, something like that. A heroin, never. Why not? The guy was a heroin addict. But I never thought she'd go there because I don't know. You just don't think that.
I didn't think it either. I never thought. I didn't find out till after she died. And the detective in my daughter's case said parents are always the last to know. So much of that has to do with shame. I know that that's the case. I'm sure for you too, Sarah. You didn't want to disappoint your mom or let her down. When I talk to audiences of high school kids, I say nobody wants to let their parents down. I don't care how old you are,
Yeah.
and you are. I mean, it's not right, but there's the attraction, it's the pull of it, and it's the way it hijacks the brain.
Yeah, it's the brain. There was no way that I would have ever said it.
Yeah, Sarah, explain to me how you got to that point where you were injecting heroin. Tell me about the guy. Who's the guy?
Well, my mom would say the devil.
Well,
I know. Yep. So I met him at 16. Sounds like some, I know. Your daughter and I,
when you fall in love at 16 and Carrie,
oh,
I know you can remember, like it takes you over. It's everything in your world, right?
when I do my keynote, I say I was young, in love, and naive, and it's one of the most dangerous combinations you can have because you have an underdeveloped brain, you have a flood of hormones and brain chemicals, and you really believe it. And you believe, in my mind, this individual and I were like Romeo and Juliet.
Yep.
I mean, 100 times over. Like the worse he was, and his family dynamics were completely opposite from mine, it almost like fed that fantasy and story in my mind that we were like destined lovers of some really horrible ending of a romantic book where everybody dies. And that's really, I ended up marrying him, and that's what I got till death do us part. I mean, I died from being in that relationship with him.
Well, I just took one look at him and I said, he's going to kill you. Everything in me says he's going to kill you. So then she and I just kind of drifted apart because I couldn't be around him. I never talk about this guy, so it's really hard for me to even bring him up.
Oh, I get it because Emily had a boyfriend from age 16 till 3 weeks before her death, and he had been so awful and done so many things. She wanted him around, but we'd actually banned him from our house. We had spent some time in jail, not prison, but Carrie, I think I probably felt exactly like you did.
I'm like, he's the devil, and I don't use that word lightly, and he's going to kill you. So she thought, oh, you don't like him because he's poor and he's this and that.
Right. And you're probably mad at your mom. I'm sure I know Emily was mad at me a
Oh, yeah.
lot.
Oh my God, she hated me.
But that's part of the I have to just interject for 1 second because that's part of the abuse and psychological warfare that happens when you have a love addiction relationship with somebody who's that unhealthy. They manipulate you to believe that the people who love you the most are your
Yes.
enemy.
Yes.
Yes. After meeting the boy at 16 years old, Sarah was in a relationship with him for 2 years, despite her mom's disapproval.
He was always off on the run, in and out of juvenile detention when we were young. He was a year older than me. And so then when we turned 18, he was 19. I was hired to work on No Country for Old Men with the Coen brothers. And he, at that point, had cut off his ankle bracelet and went on the run for the last time and then was picked up and went to federal prison.
While he was in prison, Sarah decided to take a break from the relationship for a couple of years. Even with the distance, she couldn't stop thinking about him all the time.
Physically without him, but emotionally and mentally, he was always there. Because then when he went to prison, in my mind, I thought it was my fault because I was pursuing my dream. I had left him. He was so wounded. So I needed to save him. So he actually ended up smuggling drugs into the prison that he was in, and they ruptured in his insides. And he was cut open from like his collarbone down to his pelvis. And one of the nurses stole the drugs out. It's in the paper. It's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah, he was put in solitary confinement and we didn't talk for over a year. Maybe it was like a year and a half. I feel like that was like 6 months into prison.
Obviously, he was using substances. So, had you been using
No,
substances up to that point? No.
no. So when we first got together, that was part of the appeal. I was the good girl, he was the bad boy. I had never tried a drug until I was 19. I'd never smoked weed. And that was part of it. Like he liked me because I didn't do drugs, and I liked him probably because he did. Then once he left and was put in prison, that's when I really started to have like more of a psychological breakdown and started to dabble with some pills. I was partying, I was in school, but I was also, I mean, I kind of almost lived two lives. At one point, I was running an international nonprofit in Africa. And then I was also in school in Santa Barbara where everybody was really partying. I mean, that was when I was like first started to dabble with a little bit of prescription pills. Adderall is what I was introduced to there.
Which is typical among college students
Oh, it's
anyway.
so typical. And, here's the thing about me. It's in my brain. I'm an addict, whether it's good or bad. I've always been a binger. Even with alcohol when I was younger, I didn't drink a lot, but when I did, it was always disastrous. But, I still was functioning, but I became very depressed as he went into solitary confinement, except for when I was in Africa and traveling. And when I was doing things for other people and I was outside of myself and I was of service, I was great. I was so much better. It's just unfortunately the last time I got back from Africa, he happened to get out of prison.
Sarah made a decision she would later regret. She drove from California to New Mexico without telling her mom to pick up her ex-boyfriend from prison.
And I had just been lying to her. There was no way I was going to tell her, A, that we were still talking, B, that I'm in Santa Fe and I'm picking him up from prison, but, like, she didn't know I was picking him up from prison. I had vanished, and I got, like, 14 missed calls, text messages, voicemails from you, and you said, "Where are you? I feel like you're dead." I mean, you were panicked.
Panicked. I was like, something's so wrong, something's so wrong. Finally, she fessed up. I just picked him up from prison. I mean, like, everything in me was my daughter was dead. And I was so worried. I've always had this amazing intuition where I've had dreams that come true. So when I have a bad feeling about something, you better listen because it will be absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
I think most of us, especially women, have that, Carrie, but I think we're not all in tune to it. Many of us override it, but I feel the same way. Like 3 weeks before my daughter died, I saw her in a coffin and I was like, "Oh my god, we have to do an intervention now. I don't know what she's doing." And we started to plan that intervention and she died 3 days before we were gonna hold it.
Oh.
But I knew, I just knew. I'm like, "This is bad. This is something is really bad. Something is really wrong." Despite Carrie's intuition and disapproval, Sarah not only picked up her ex boyfriend from prison, but also rekindled a romantic relationship with him.
She went like this, boom.
Nosedive. I mean, within, I think, 2 months, we were so heavily on drugs.
I think you said you couldn't change him, so you decided to join him.
Yeah, that's how I felt, and I remember saying that. But I knew, and this is where it was something a little bit different, and this talking about that intuition, I had changed a lot in those 2 years. I mean, had worked on Academy Award-winning films, I traveled all over the world, I ran my nonprofit, I had this fantasy of him and I, but by the time he came out of prison, we were 2 very, very different people. I mean, he
Mhm.
came out tattooed from his toes to his neck with literally the devil all over him. I came back just from Africa, and it was weird. Like, honestly, I remember picking him up and thinking it was gonna be the same, and there was this part of me that was like, "Oh, this is a bad idea." I mean, I had that voice, and I remember thinking that and feeling that, but then I just didn't listen, and it was like, "No, I'm gonna save him, I'm gonna help him." But I had already started dabbling with pills, and I had started partying. I had, like, awoken a part of me that had not been there before, and you gotta think this is probably 16 years ago now. So, at that point, when we were using drugs, he was taking Suboxone right after prison. But at that point, it was not as prescribed, it was not used as much as a medication-assisted treatment, it was, but not as prevalent as now, so a lot of people were using Suboxone in and out of prison because nobody was testing for it, so the drug testing kits hadn't really come up to speed.
Oh, they were misusing it, basically, is what you're
Oh, very
saying.
much so, yeah. Very much misusing it.
And it strikes me also that fentanyl was not prevalent in the
Oh,
drug supply the way it is in the last 10 years, and especially in the last 5 to 8 years.
it wasn't. I remember you could kinda get fentanyl lollipops, or every once in a while, somebody would get a fentanyl patch from somebody who was a nurse,
Right, like they're from the hospitals and they'd
yeah,
suck on the patches, but it wasn't being laced in if
no.
you were getting heroin, you got heroin.
You were heroin from Afghanistan or Mexico or China
Mhm.
if you got China white, and we were in New Mexico, and my ex was very connected with that drug trade population from Mexico and Colombia. He was a drug dealer and a heroin and a cocaine dealer right out of prison, but he was using Suboxone, and that's actually was my first introduction to an opioid, was Suboxone. 'Cause when you don't have an opioid tolerance and you're using Suboxone, it's the same compound. The buprenorphine
Right.
is an opioid, which I'm sure you're familiar with, so if you misuse it, you still can get high when you don't have a tolerance, and so we started using Suboxone, and then quickly he figured out ways to pass his drug tests, and then I found him shooting heroin one day in a bathroom, and I was shocked. Again, I think the denial it's I don't know if it's denial or it's our brains trying to protect us from reality, but I know he's a heroin addict. I knew he was doing heroin in prison. We're doing Suboxone, but even I was shocked when I found him. I think you're shocked anytime you find anybody you know shooting heroin. It was so, distressing, and I was gonna leave him right there and then. I mean, it was so scary to me that that was even something that was happening, and it just shows you, like, how toxic love addiction can be and how dangerous it is, because within a month after that, he shot me up with heroin.
So, how did you get from that point of being shocked, "I think I'm gonna leave," to allowing him to do that? What how do you think that do you have a do you know? Can you explain it?
I
Like
mean, no, no, and
yeah,
yes, I think part of it was I had, like I said, I had started normalizing doing drugs with him, so that was the Suboxone. Then we had started doing some Percocets, some hydrocodones. Then I found him shooting heroin, and he was already, on it enough that he had to go through some withdrawals. I helped him withdraw, so again, that's like that bonding martyr, I'm saving you. And then it happened a couple more times, and every time you just believe them. You believe them. They're gonna get better, and they're gonna change, and they love you. And again, I really think it's the dopamine. I think it's the same thing in a love addiction as it is in a drug addiction. You get these huge lows, and so then when there's, like, a moment of normalcy, your brain recognizes it as, like, such a monumental moment that you really kinda hold on to that feeling, and so by the time a month or so later, maybe it was longer, I can't really remember the details at this point, but we had friends over and they were all doing heroin at that point. Because at that point, I had kind of accepted, "Okay, he's gonna do heroin." And then we had other friends that were doing heroin. So it became less shocking, it became a little bit more normalized, and I had just drank way too much, and that was the moment, like my mom said, I realized if I can't beat him and I can't change him, I'm gonna join him. And truthfully, there was a part of me that was, like, very intrigued on how is this so amazing that you can give up everything for this?
you were curious.
I was curious, and this is horrible, and I'm gonna say it because somebody has to. I was jealous. And I mean, how sick. I was jealous of his relationship with drugs and heroin because he loved heroin more than he loved me. So talk
Yeah.
about, like, low self-esteem, just putting myself out there, my god. And then I got it. Once I was shot up, I got it. And I remember, again, that was when it was, like, drop to my knees. And then it's why they say chasing the dragon. I mean, once you do it, you chase that high till your death.
It's just the best feeling you ever had, right?
It's like the worst and the best feeling you ever had. It's both.
Hmm.
I mean, you're sick, you're vomiting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible, but it's a rush. And again, this is why I wanna push this industry towards neuroscience and brain health.
Yes.
It was in my brain. I was hijacked. There was something that met my dopamine or serotonin levels that mixed with that, and there was no stopping me. Something changed in my brain.
After that injection, were you just an intravenous user from that point on? I mean, were you just using
Every day, all day, to the point where, I mean, I had track marks from my toes to my neck,
oh my god.
and all I did was do drugs all day
She
long.
took that type A, go get it personality and she went after it like nobody's business. I mean, it wasn't a dabble.
The one thing I noticed about my daughter when I knew something was horribly wrong, and it was probably during the last year of her life, she had lost weight. She was picking her skin and she was blaming like a compulsive disorder or whatever. And she just kind of became a shell, like all of that spirit, all of that. When you talk about Sarah being so strong willed when she was young, and all of that spirit and that excitement that she had for everything, it was just gone.
Yeah.
And I just saw it for a moment and it saw some vulnerability, and I had asked her what was going on, and she told me that she had been using Xanax and that her boyfriend helped her get off of Xanax, and that's why she was acting more like herself. But then I think she went right back to heroin. I mean, I'm sure it was heroin. I'm sure just Xanax sounded better. It was almost like I lost her before I lost her because I don't know what happened to Emily, and I'm sure it was that same, where did Sarah go?
No, she was hijacked. She was gone.
I feel like you had a lot of that same experience though too with me. Again, you probably didn't recognize the symptoms, but I became very thin. And again, when I talk to parents or anybody, it's like, those are the things you have to take really serious. I started wearing very long, always long sleeve shirts.
Yeah, I never thought about that till later. I wasn't tuned into that, and so I thought about it later. I thought, "I don't think I saw her arms because they said there were track marks,"
Yep.
you know, and I don't think I ever saw that. I mean, I know I didn't see it. So she always had these, like, flowy things on and
Yep.
yeah,
No, that's what Sarah did. And she became a shell of herself. I would look at my daughter and be like, where's my daughter? Like, I don't even know who you are. I don't know who this person is in front of me. I often explain it as if a train is coming down the tracks at, 120 miles an hour and your child is on the track and you can see the train going towards and you are screaming and you are waving your hands and you are yelling and telling them to get off and they just stand there. But you know what the end result's going to be. You can't stop it.
right, right, and I use that train analogy all the time, Carrie, but I always say that I was standing in front of the train trying to stop it, just trying to stop it, and then after she died, it was just like the train ran me over.
Yeah,
'Cause it's just like you're just so powerless against this thing. I mean, your mother couldn't have stopped you.
No.
I tried.
I think we give mothers way too much power
Yeah,
in our culture, like, "Oh, what kind of mother were you if your child."
you can't do anything. I mean, she just hated me. And
Yeah,
it was so hard because we've always been so close. And so I knew, okay, I've got to just like give her some space, but I can't give her too much space because I'm so worried. And then she called me one day and said, I'm getting married. And are you coming? And I said, no, 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 I'm not.
oh,
We're going down to the justice of the peace or the courthouse. And she was so upset that I wasn't coming. And I said, Sarah, I can't endorse this. I can't show up and pretend like I think this is okay. And so she went ahead and got married. And 1 month to the day is when I was going to go to the movies. And all of a sudden, this thing came over me. And I said to my mother, who was with me, I said, oh my God, Sarah's dead. Sarah's dead. I have got to go to her house. And my mom was like, Cary, you've got to let her be an adult. And I'm like, no, I can't. There's something terribly wrong. I smashed through her bedroom window and found her unconscious.
Carrie's seemingly impulsive actions turned out to be a life-saving stroke of intuition. She'll be forever thankful she followed her gut, even if it seemed a little crazy, because she was able to rush her daughter to the hospital to get life-saving treatment.
Because I followed, and I call it listening grace. So many times we want to make an excuse. Oh, that's so silly. I don't know why I feel that way. Or, your overprotective mother, stop, leave her alone. Honestly, like we're blessed with it for a reason, and we just have to act on it. I literally just turned around, literally broke in, crawled through the window, and found the most horrifying sight of a shell of my daughter. She had dyed her hair black. She had track marks everywhere. She was unconscious. She was like 98 pounds because at that point she'd just completely been hiding from me. I got her to the hospital. They were able to stabilize her, but she went through a horrible detox and she kept wanting to leave. She was screaming and yelling at me, and you can't keep me, and you can't treat me. And the husband was calling the hospital saying, you have no right to treat her. And by the way, he had more power over it than I did.
Yep.
Thank God I had a medical power of attorney. So I actually did have medical power of attorney over her. And all of a sudden, in the midst of her freaking out, I'm leaving, you can't keep me, thrashing, she was the biggest mess you've ever seen. It was like God came down and pulled the plug, and all of a sudden, her eyes rolled in the back of her head. She could not speak. She could not talk. She went into like coma type state. So it wasn't coma, but it was like a stroke that she never got out of. So her eyes rolled in the back of her head, her hands curled. She couldn't talk. She was drooling. That was it. That was it.
Sarah, do you have any memory of your mom coming through the bedroom and taking you to the hospital, and do you have any memory
No,
of any of that?
I don't have memory of her coming in and getting me. Once I was at the hospital, I remember that. But I unfortunately and very fortunately remember once I went into that stroke-like state, like, I was as aware as I am right now talking to you as I was in that state.
Really?
100% with it, and it was terrifying because I knew something was really, really wrong when all of a sudden my family was pretty much coming to say goodbye to me. I mean, everybody was in there and talking really slow, like something was very wrong with me, and I remember my mom holding my hand, and I have these big eyes, and she's, like, telling me it's gonna be okay, and I'm in this coma, stroke state, and all I could think is, like, "This is not okay. There is nothing okay about this." I like, this is not okay. I mean, I was in a diaper and a wheelchair.
The shock of her daughter's condition and the relentless pressure from Sarah's husband to take her out of the hospital, Cary knew she had to explore other healthcare options, ones Sarah's husband wouldn't be aware of. After some searching, Cary landed on a facility in Arizona that offered integrated health care and substance use disorder treatment. The catch? It came with a hefty price tag of $70,000 a month.
I have no idea how to fix this. I'm a mother. I can fix anything. I can't fix this. I don't. So someone had mentioned, well, you should go to this particular rehab in Arizona. So I called them and I said, can I bring my daughter? And they said, well, does she want to come? And I said, no. They said, well, then we won't take her. She has to say, yes, I want to come. So I put the phone up to Sarah and I was like, if you want to live, you need to say the words yes. Well, she couldn't. So she was signing the word yes. And I'm like, you have to say yes. Finally, she said, yes. And I said, did you hear that? And they said, okay. I had to get out. I had to get her out of New Mexico. So I put her in a wheelchair and I'm wheeling her through the airport. And the hundreds of times I've taken her to the airport and she skipped away waving at me, just full of life, full of excitement, full of her next adventure. Here I am wheeling her, she can't speak, she can't talk. I don't know if she's like this for the rest of her life. But I said that moment, I said, if this is what I have, I'm okay with this.
And then I almost flatlined. I mean, by the time we got to the place, I was in the hospital and the ambulance, and my mom was just holding my hand the entire time, telling me, like, you are not going to die. You're going to fight, and today's not your day to die. And it was that voice, like, I swear to God, I mean, it was her voice, her there with me, telling me I'm not going to die. And I held on. Like, I remember holding on. It was like something inside of me was just trying to hold on.
So, what did the doctors say? I mean, I'm surprised they even let you leave the hospital with her in that state.
You know what? He was a saint.
But once they got me to the medical part from the airplane, that's when I almost died, and then they got me to the hospital then in Arizona, and then I went back there once I was medically stable.
She couldn't walk. She couldn't do anything. I mean, we drug her in. I had someone meet me at the airport and we carried her into the facility and they were kind of shocked at the condition she was in. And then they took her vitals and her heart was just basically exploding and they called 911 and she and I were in the ambulance racing back to the hospital and they were trying to keep her alive. I just remember looking at her thinking, no, this cannot be the end. Like,
Yeah,
this can't be the end.
yeah.
So after the hospital, they said, go back to New Mexico, take her home. I said, I can't. I can't take her home. She's married and I can't bring her back to New Mexico. And they said, well, they're not going to take her. She's a mess. I got on my knees in the middle of the hospital and I was like, please, begging, just tell them she's okay. Tell them she's okay enough for me to drop her off. And they did. So I took her back and I dropped her off with a little suitcase and no identification and no money. And there she stayed.
But like many people suffering from substance use disorder, Sarah attempted to leave treatment just 2 weeks after she entered the facility. Fortunately, Cary was able to talk her into staying.
feels like a bad nightmare, but a blur at this point, this many years in. It was hell. Like, I remember the actual detox part, but I mean, I didn't think I was gonna live. I mean, I was so weak and I was so broken. I mean, I just laid on the floor, just vomiting all over myself. I mean, it was like The Exorcist is really what I felt like I was in. It was horrible. I mean, the problem was I could call anybody, and so I was calling him. But my mom, this is where it's like I give her so much credit for how she approached it. She never judged me. And this is like very, very, I believe, important on how you handled it, mom, because while it was shocking, I knew how bad it was. Like that once you kind of get sobered up and you get off the detox and you're aware of your entire life, but you never judged me. You never made me feel shameful. You never made me feel guilty. I mean, you were just so solid and there and just hopeful and just like, we're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. When you break a bone, it grows back stronger. Please just stay one more day.
I love what you said about how she wasn't judging you, she was just loving you, right? She's just being your mom. And I really learned that with Emily, like, early on, when you talk about some of the tough love stuff you did, Carrie, like, those were hard things to do. "No, I'm not coming to your wedding. I don't approve of this. It's not right." I did the tough love stuff for quite a while, and I found it only drove my daughter further away from me, actually. But when I always approached her from a standpoint of love, I kept her in my life at least. At least she kept coming back, she kept coming around. And so I'm glad that I did that because our last words to each other were, "I love you." And, I have that now. And it's really easy to be angry at the person because you're so powerless and you're trying everything. And it's so frustrating. And, it's easy for anger to come out, right? And
Yeah,
I think that if you can always put yourself in their position and understand that this thing has hijacked their brain and they aren't who they were and all of those things, it's easier to approach the person who's suffering from substance use disorder
I think
with
that's
love.
true. And you don't want to cut them out. So there's a fine line between,
Enabling and yeah.
right. So I never let her go ever. She was never gone from me. We were distanced, but I was never like, that's it. I can't talk to you. You're out of my life. And I understand how people get to that place. I just didn't because I was so terrified that if I let go in every physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, it was an entire thing. I felt every single one of those aspects. It was important to stay connected.
Yeah. But you stayed with me when I came to the other side. And that again is where I'm just going to keep preaching to anybody that will listen that compassionate, loving belief and hope. And I believe in you because I'll tell you what, there's nothing worse than knowing how bad you have just ruined your entire life and feeling so hopeless. It's like a hopeless and a helpless and a shame that I'll just never forget. I mean, I remember being embarrassed to go into the gas station because the way people would look at me when I first got sober. I used to call my mom every day and just say, I'm never going to be okay. How am I ever going to be okay? Like, I'm never, how do I do this? And it's helpless.
You said to me one day, I'm nothing but a dirty heroin addict. Nobody's ever going to look at me the same. And that's when I said, when you break a bone, it grows back stronger. But I said, you know what, Sarah? I said, there is no shame. We will
Yep.
never walk in shame because I realize this is a disease. But she was so broken and so hurt in her soul over how she had let her life go or how horrible she felt about herself that I knew that my role was to take this completely broken child and rebuild her into the person that I know she was meant to be. And I said, is this the life that we thought you'd have? Is this the life you dreamed of? No, but God works in mysterious ways, and you are going to do something so amazing with your life because you've been given a second chance. And it's going to be what you create. It's not going to be anything that we've given you. You've been privileged. This is all what you are going to build for yourself.
And Sarah, I'm not talking about religion here, but I think addiction is a spiritual problem, don't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me what you think about that.
I'm a biggest proponent of the biopsychosocial and I'd add spiritual model. It affects everything. It affects the mind, the body, the spirit, the emotional. I mean, it's an entire affliction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I took it on a very spiritual level, and I'm not, I mean, I consider myself spiritual. I don't have a affiliation of any sort, but I thought I was in a war for her soul.
Yeah.
When I say physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, I mean it. I mean every aspect of her body to me had been hijacked. My job as her mother and this connection that we've always had was to make her feel loved and beautiful inside. I'm not talking physical, and to know that the whole world was ahead of her. But I also know we started from the beginning. I said, today you're going to get up and you're going to brush your teeth. Like, I'm talking about building a foundation that was so solid that it could never get knocked down again. And it was a year. I mean, this is no easy recovery. This is not a quick fix. This is not a go to rehab for 30 days.
Right.
So you better look at this as a very long term, every day. It's a struggle. But to have someone who believes in you and gives you hope is what everybody needs. Everybody needs this.
I relied on my mom. I mean, honestly, for probably the first 9 months, it really I didn't really wanna live. Truthfully, I didn't really wanna live. I didn't really know what I was living for, but I just decided to listen to somebody other than my own head. I was very involved in the 12-step community. I mean, I was involved in everything. Equine therapy, therapeutic retreats. I was in sober livings for a year. I mean, I was in every type of everything. I'm all about all the tools and in the toolbox.
Despite all of her work, Sarah admits that the pull of substance use disorder was overpowering. She began sneaking alcohol into the sober living facility.
Which again shows power of addiction and where the brain was. And so that last time I drank, it was the first time I really thought I could go down to Skid Row. I was in Los Angeles at that time and get a speedball. Like I had that craving just off drinking alcohol. And I remember just thinking, I don't think I want to die today. Like enough time had passed where it was like, no, I don't want to die. And so that's when I think I had my own awakening, really getting totally sober is what ultimately led me down the path that I'm at now. And, that was almost 14 years ago.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. And as more time goes by, is it easier? Is there ever a time where you think, oh, I could go back to that? And do you think you could?
Not for a second, which is why it's almost so surreal. When I tell my story, I can't even believe that that was me.
It's like a different person.
Yeah, it's a different person, it's a different life, but I'll tell you what, I know addiction. I've worked in this industry now for over a decade. I still don't drink. And I have no illusion that if I started to drink again, that could be me, right? I don't know. I know what I'm capable of things that I never thought was possible. And that probably will never go away. I think that's human nature. So why tempt it?
Right. And are you ever worried, Carrie, or do you feel
No, funny enough. I mean, I worried for so long.
yeah, get that.
I still to this day maybe sleep 2 or 3 hours. I mean, I'm sure I have post traumatic stress disorder. I mean, my anxiety level is off the charts. But do I like wake up and think, God, I hope she doesn't do a drug today? Absolutely not. I only get worried like if she's really tired or stressed. And not that I think she's going to do drugs, but I just don't want her to suffer in any way because she's suffered so much.
All that suffering also allowed Sarah to find a new purpose in life that brings her true joy. For 14 years, she's been helping others who struggle with substance use disorder.
I went back to school was really that first step, probably year 2 of sobriety, decided I should probably do something and felt ready to like engage in the world again. So I ended up studying international political science with a focus on socioeconomic development. Essentially, I became an opioid drug treatment researcher. So I looked at different models of opioid treatment around the world, policy, really the economic development. And then went in and started doing some consulting after school, set up various sober living houses, wellness initiatives, and then I became one of the directors of a very large adolescent Medicaid-based program in Washington State. And through that, I ended up doing a lot of Medicaid integration with physical health, behavioral health, sat on over 15 different city and state task forces, policy, legislation. I built one of the first sex trafficking centers for behavioral health youth. It's one of the first models of its kind. I started opioid task forces and a founding board member of quite a few opioid and fentanyl specific organizations. So I have been busy to
Yeah,
say
you're making me tired with that list. So
very much like system level. How do we change the system, improve the system because it's a very broken system? And then now I decided to kind of take my lived experience, my personal experience, and my academic experience and create a new platform. And so that's what Follow the Poppy is. It's really like an all encompassing opioid support platform for individuals, families, and organizations. So I do public speaking, consulting, and then eventually I'll be building some online programs and resources that can go direct to individuals and families to really help them navigate the whole landscape of opioid use disorder.
well, it is really tough for families to navigate. I mean, even when you should know. I mean, I've talked to people in the medical profession. I was a journalist and a researcher. I mean, there's just so many things. It's just so difficult.
There's no help.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, to have to pay $70,000 for 1 month of treatment, this is terrible. This is an huge epidemic, and this is a disease. And there needs to be treatment facilities for everybody, and there needs to be long term treatment facilities, and it needs to be covered by insurance.
Yeah.
Right.
This is a disease.
We'd rather send people to prisons and not treat them. I mean, that's
Yep.
really what we do in this society.
And that was really my passion, was because of my mom's journey and how interconnected it was to mine. And I'm only alive because of her, really, truthfully. Like, I wouldn't be here if she hadn't found me and nurtured me through it. I want to make sure that we do create specific programs for the family and to help them. So I also, though, as I mentioned earlier, do have a toddler. I have a baby. I'm a mom. And so that's changed my life completely in the best way ever. So I'm very privileged.
It's amazing. And I love talking to both of you. I love hearing both of your perspectives on this. Of course, I can totally relate to your mom, but some of what you say also helps me understand maybe my daughter's mindset better. This podcast has really helped me with that as I've talked with people who have been where you were, people who have suffered from substance use disorder, people who have been revived, and people who have gone into recovery. It's really helped increase my understanding because it is hard for loved ones to understand.
Oh, I'm sure. It's still hard for me to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I really do. And I just appreciate all of the work you're doing. And I think it's incredible. I'm so glad that you both could join me. You don't know how sharing your story is going to impact or who it's going to impact, but it certainly will.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have a story you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. You can find our contact information under the show notes of this podcast. And while you're there, we'd appreciate it if you take just a moment to rate and review this episode. It means the world to us. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wonnenberg King and Anna Fye.